This budget issue raises half a dozen momentous issues that are all being kind of crunched together with very poor and fragmentary coverage by the mainstream media, who cover mostly things that matter less and avoid mostly the things that matter more. So let me try in a short amount of time to give people a context for it. By far, the most important, long-lasting, and consequential act of the first presidency of Donald Trump was the tax cut bill passed in the Congress under his pressure in December of 2017. What that did was to give an enormous tax cut to corporations and the rich. And as always, there's a sprinkling of minor tax cuts for average people so that they are so grateful that they got anything that they don't look at who got the lion's share of this tax cut. What made it even more grotesque for any economist was that that tax cut came at the end of a 30-year period from the late 20th century across the first 2 decades of the 21st century. That was a time of a massive redistribution of wealth from the bottom and the middle of the income distribution in this country to the top. Or to say the same thing in English, never did corporations and the rich need a tax cut less than when they got it from Mr. Trump. And now the even more important point. They brought him back after the disastrous Biden years to do for them again what he had shown himself able to deliver to them the first time. That's why we have him. The people who run this country are not interested in the culture wars he performs. They don't even want the tariffs he imposes. That's all political theater to distract us, to focus us elsewhere while he gets down to business. And what's the business? Number one, the tax cut of 2017 was to expire at the end of this year. That's in 6 months. So the first thing they're doing right now in the Senate is passing a bill that extends those tax cuts from the first presidency indefinitely into the future. And the second thing is to add even more tax cuts to corporations and the rich, along with, of course, the usual sprinkling of little things that a few people will benefit from, like taking taxes off of tips and things like that. So we're seeing vintage Trump at his core task for the people who run this society, which is to give them tons of tax relief. Now, my second point, then I'll stop. My second point is about understanding what is going on here. For years now, under both Republicans and Democrats, the government of the United States has been controlled by a duopoly, a stifling duopoly of 2 major parties, both of whom are begging all the time for donations from the people who are rich in this culture. If you want to see how upset they are by anything that threatens their wealth, watch the establishments of both parties going after Mr. Mamdani in New York City. The terror of the establishment that any association with this very successful young politician might impair the donations is strangling them all up. So what politicians have been doing is giving tax cuts to their donors. The donors want the cuts. The politicians want the donations. This is a marriage, if you pardon me, made in heaven, and they take care of each other. But the problem is, of course, if you take less money from the corporations and the rich. And we are one of the most unequal societies in the world right now. So if you exempt corporations and the rich, you're exempting where the money is for any government. So what are you going to do? Well, you have two choices. With less money coming in, you can spend less. And that means cutting the food stamps and the Medicaid and the Medicare and the help to universities and the research. You know the drill. They're not going to touch the military because that, like not touching the donors, is a taboo. We don't allow that on the table, let alone in serious conversation. The problem is, if you don't spend money on the mass of people, there's a risk they will decide that this system isn't geared toward them, which it isn't, and they may then see it. So that's a danger. So you can't really cut back. And the Republicans and the Democrats argue over that. The Republicans are willing to cut a lot. The Democrats cut, but not quite so much. The Democrats become Republican light. But you know, if you don't raise the money and you still want to give people enough so they don't revolt, you're going to run short. You're going to have the deficit that Brian began our program with today. And so here's what they do. They go back to the corporations and the rich, and they say to them, we have to do a minimum of spending to keep the lid on the rest of the people in this country. So we're not going to tax you. Don't worry. We're your buddies. We're married to you. Would you please lend to the government the money we didn't tax from you? Because that way we have enough to spend. And the only cost is a growing debt of the United States to play this game. And here's the last point. Eventually, you can't play the game anymore. And you know why? And if you want to see what arrogance really is, here it comes. Corporations and the rich are telling the United States government, we have been playing this game with you. Thank you for the tax cuts. We've been lending to you, but you are so heavily in debt now that you are no longer safe for us to lend to. That's why the three great rating agencies, Standard & Poor, Moody's, and Fitch, have all downgraded the United States debt from the AAA rating, the best rating that it used to have, and that many other governments to this day do have, but we don't. So now the government is stuck. It can't continue the hustle of the last half century. This game of cutting the taxes of the rich, borrowing instead, running up a debt that nobody in their right mind can figure out how to ever pay back. Now they can't do it. Now there are a few Republican senators who are saying, we can't do this anymore. And the rest of them are saying, no, you have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it. We're running to the end, they say, and that's where they're stalemated in Washington right now. That's the only issue. The basic question, not at all. Nobody in that government puts on the table in a serious way taxing corporations and the rich, taxing them the way they were in the 1960s, or the way they were in the 1970s, or the way they were in the 1980s, all of which would bring the government a ton of money that it would then not have to borrow. It's obvious. Every economist sees it. But they manage politically to act as if that were not possible. And the only truth of it is they don't have the political courage, neither the Republicans nor the Democrats, to get out there and mobilize the people around an issue like this, which ought to be easy to do.